I've been saying it a lot, that every single day when you wake up, you can decide who you're going to be. And the reason why it's so important to wake up and either consciously choose, decide, or set an intention about who you're going to be. The reason why this is so important to start doing every single morning is because if you don't consciously decide who you're going to be, your habits, your old patterns, and the stress of the day will decide it for you. You see, human beings, this was so liberating when I learned that human beings are nothing more than a ton of patterns. We learn patterns from other people, and then we repeat those patterns. And so if you find that you're stuck in a rut, or you're overwhelmed, or you're in a negative place, and you are really tired of being there, the first step to getting the life that you want is you must wake up every morning and interrupt the patterns and the automatic nature of how you go through your day, just going through the motions. And the simplest way to do that is to wake up and set an intention. So when I say decide who you're going to be, what I'm talking about is, what mood are you going to be in? How are you going to behave? What are you going to show up and do today? Are you going to be motivated? Are you going to be patient? Are you going to be present? Are you going to be grateful? Those are decisions that you can make. And when you wake up in the morning and you set an intention, today I am going to see the good. Today I am going to be optimistic. Today I'm going to turn off the television when I get home. I'm going to spend an hour on my dreams. When you wake up and set an intention and you decide who you're going to be today and how you're going to show up and what it's going to feel like to be you, you take control of the day. And you give yourself an anchor to keep coming back to, so that when something stresses you out, or you catch yourself thinking negative things, or you get a text, or somebody doesn't respond to you and you start to feel discouraged, come back to your intention. Today I said I would be optimistic. Today I said I would see the good. Today I said no matter how tired I am, when I get home tonight, I'm going to find an hour for me. That's what I mean, Night Queen Bee, when I say decide who you're going to be today. And that's why I think it's so powerful when you wrap your mind around the fact that every single day you get to wake up and decide who you're going to be today. And it's the first step in taking control and creating the life you want. I haven't lost anybody that I love. So I would not say what I'm about to say if somebody that I loved had died in this pandemic. But I have found the great pause that the last 2 months have forced me to take to be the greatest gift that I have received in the last decade. My kids have been home. I have been off the road. I have been forced to slow down. I have been reminded of what actually matters: your health, your family, your friends, what you're doing to take care of your mind and your body and your spirit, and making sure that you do something with the time that you have that you really, really enjoy. And the other thing that it's really made me stop and think about is making sure that I'm having fun, that my whole life isn't just work. And it's made me really start to think about the fact that I don't want to go back to the life that I was living before the pandemic hit. How many of you feel that way? That this has been a gigantic mental perspective switch reset button that has, boom, hit you really hard. I want to know in the comments, what is it that you, with this new perspective that the pandemic has given you, what is it that you want to change in your life coming out of this? I want to start seeing. I see people saying this has been a wake-up call. I see people saying, yes, this has been a huge shift in my perspective. I see Brianna saying, I want to travel less for work. What do you want? Kelly says she's had a mental switch. Kelly, what has this pandemic given you in terms of the gift? Heather's saying, I want to ask myself, what do I really want to do? Kim says, I don't want to go back to the rat race. Brock says, I want to start the year excited about it. I see somebody saying, Larissa says a new business. Megan says, I want more boundaries. Tara says, I want to have more fun. What is it that you want to change, given the gift that this pandemic has given you in terms of shifting your perspective? Dinky says, value my friends and family. Jilla says, take care of my mental health. Spend more time with family. What do you want to change, everybody? Seriously, what do you want to change about your life? Is it a relationship? Is it that you have had the time to take care of yourself in small ways and that's giving you greater control in your life? Do you want to change your job coming out of this? Do you want to launch a business coming out of this? Do you want to change your timeline for achieving your goals? Is there some project that you want to take on? Because what you're going to hear me say over and over again is that the single most important project you could ever work on is yourself. And the greatest gift that any challenge will ever give you is a perspective shift and the realization that you can face hard things, that you can survive hard things, and that in learning more deeply about yourself and about what you value through the challenges in life, you are going to be handed a moment where you can make a decision. You hear me say all the time, you're one decision away from a different life. Changing your life does not take motivation. Motivation is garbage. Changing your life takes discipline. The discipline to make a decision to change. You see, you need three things if you want to come out of this pandemic and truly change your life for the better. So many of you do not want to go back to the life that you were living. You see something greater for you. And what you're going to need in order to make that shift is you need clarity. You need the clarity to write the change down. And I want you to start right now. What in the comments? Let's get really clear. Terry wants to come out of this a healthier and better person. What is the clarity? Tell me the change that you want to make coming out of this. You got to have the clarity to write it down. That's number one. The second thing that you got to have in order to make a change happen is you've got to learn the skill of confidence, which is the ability to try something when you don't feel ready. You may not know how to do this change. I see advocate for myself. I see more physical movement. I see I want to change my job. I want to start a business. I want to earn more money. I want to travel less. I want my work to have meaning. I want to get out of an abusive relationship. I want to help people in need. I want to make sure that I continue to keep the promises that I've been keeping, getting up on time, working out every day, working on my relationship. This is fantastic because you're having a moment of clarity. And when you start to write it down, you are starting to develop the confidence and the knowing that you deserve to have this change happen. And then finally, what do you need in order to really change your life? Because it's not motivation, everybody, it's discipline. Discipline to make small promises, keep small promises, discipline to take small actions when you feel afraid, the discipline to find the courage to push yourself forward when you don't know how. That's how you change your life. Just those three things: clarity, confidence, courage. That's all you need. And that's why you got me in your life, because I'm here to push you. I'm here to encourage you. And I love seeing what you want to change. That, oh, I see you need help building confidence. No problem. I got you covered. Because confidence isn't something that you feel. Confidence is a skill. Confidence is the willingness to try. Because it's through the act of trying, through the act of simply writing down what's the change that you want to make right there in the comments. Just writing it down and trying out writing what that feels like, that's going to show you that you have the ability to start to express the things that you want. And that's the first step, to claim these things that you think about. So for those of you, more than 100 of you, who have written to me in the last week and who have said, I've had a huge perspective shift thanks to this pandemic. And there are some major changes I want to make in my life. I want to start a women's group. I want to end this relationship that I'm in. I want to stop bashing myself all the time. I want to launch that business I've been talking about. All of the things that you've put on hold. Now is the time to change. So many of you asked me, is it the right time to change your job after a pandemic like this? Absolutely. Because if you don't hear the clarity that's inside you, if you don't quiet the noise and tune in to hear, if your instincts, if your wisdom, if your knowing, if inside of you, you hear yourself saying, I got to get a new job. I got to get out of this relationship. I don't want to live where I live anymore. I want to be near the water. I want to be in the mountains. I want to be out of the city. You have to tune into that stuff. And then it's about confidence and courage to take action. That's it.
So the 5-second rule.
Wait, first off, when did you discover the 5-second rule?
Okay, so 2009.
This is when you first tried it or discovered it, or?
Oh, it's a total horror show mistake.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So 2009, I was unemployed and feeling like...
You unemployed? How?
Well, okay.
You have too much charisma, too much passion.
Yeah, because everything's working right now. That's why. I'm not like this when things are not working.
Sure.
Ask my husband of 22 years.
Yeah.
What had happened is I had all these career changes, and I got into the media business, again, by mistake. I had a coaching business, and Inc. magazine was writing an article about coaches, and they featured me in it, and CNBC called.
Got it.
And that led to me doing some stuff with CNBC, and I spent a year still coaching people and then doing some stuff for CNBC, and then Fox called. And they were interested in having me host a television show. Now, you got to understand, I'm from North Muskegon, Michigan. Mm-hmm. I mean, the media business, Fox, LA. Yeah. The closest thing I had ever seen to a celebrity, Lewis, was the Muskegon Lumberjacks, the farm team, right?
Right.
From for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, the AA team or whatever.
Yeah, my dad was the hometown doc for the hockey team there.
Right.
So I thought,
the mayor was a celebrity.
Wow, my life's about to change. I'm about to be a celebrity. Wow, we're going to solve this is amazing, you know. So I was originally going to be hosting a show for Fox where we were making over small businesses.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty cool, right? We show up, we do extreme home makeover for the office. Everybody's happy. We all know that doesn't solve business problems, but it makes for a nice television show. By the time I get to LA, they've changed the format. It's now called Someone's Gotta Go. And I'm going to be firing people on national television from real jobs.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
That sounds fun.
Horrible.
Oh, my gosh.
Plus, we haven't told the offices that this is what we're doing.
Oh, my gosh.
So you show up in Act 1, and you've got everybody all like this because they're going to think they're going to get new IKEA furniture and a paint job, and this is going to be the best thing in the world for their small business. Now, meanwhile, I'm a 4th-generation small business owner, so that's like my people. Grew up at a kitchen table with farmers, and my mom at a retail store, and my other grandparents were bakers. And so when it comes to like the heart and soul and what's so important when you launch your own business and how personal it is, I mean, this was like gut-wrenching. So I show up, the first act, you kick out the owner of the company, who then freaks out, then all the employees freak out. Act number 2, we announce that somebody's getting fired, and then that's the bad news. The good news is that I'm not picking. We're going to have you vote somebody out. So it's Survivor in an office place.
Oh, my goodness.
So
That sucks.
when I learn all this, I have a panic attack, even though I'm on Zoloft, and I call the guy that got me the gig and say, you got to get me out of this. Like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but they've already cast the entire show and you're out there for 5 weeks and you don't have a choice. They're going to sue you. And I said, then fine, get me some Xanax because I don't think I can get through this thing. Like, this is awful. Luckily, we taped 2 episodes and legal tabled it. But here was the problem. I was attached to the show and I only got paid if the show was shooting. So and being an entrepreneur, I also kind of put all my energy into this, shut down the coaching thing. Really thought that it also kind of negotiated a deal that was a sort of a back end deal, thinking I'm entrepreneur, always thinking about got to have a piece of the action. Yes.
Yeah, of course.
That was a dumb move. And I was in a contract for a year while they figured out what to do.
So you couldn't do another show. Yeah.
So, I just felt like I had made a huge mistake and I felt really embarrassed. And I didn't know at the age of 41 what I should be doing with my life. And while it's neat that I had jumped careers so many times, I started to feel like somebody that actually wasn't successful at all because I didn't have a career track. I had a bunch of jumps from one thing to another. Now, looking back, it makes perfect sense. But standing in the middle of the mess, it just felt like everything was caving in, probably just like when you were sleeping on your couch, feeling injured and like everything I thought that was about to happen isn't happening now. Meanwhile, my husband had opened up a restaurant business. It had been his dream. He worked in high tech and came home one day after getting laid off and said, I'm never going to get on a plane and do a PowerPoint presentation for a company I don't care about or own. And I said, great, what's your plan? And he said, I'm going to open a pizza restaurant. And I looked at him and I said, was there a trust fund that was part of this marriage that I was unaware of? Because I'm not quite sure how we're going to
get the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Did someone die? You got an insurance policy? Check.
Yes. And he said no. And I then said the most famous lines of our 22-year marriage, Lewis. I looked at him and I said, listen, buddy, inspiration is for strangers. You get your ass back to that job and you pay the mortgage and you forget this dream. You're not going to this.
Wow.
So because change is scary.
Yeah.
So we fought and he won. And the first one was a real home run. And
he opened a pizza store.
Oh, he did. Yeah. 40 seats right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. He and his best friend. And they won Best of Boston. It was incredible. What do you do when everything's...
They make money, though.
They did on the first one. Okay. So what do you do when everything's working? Woo, let's go all chips in. Let's put in the home equity line. Let's put in the kids' college savings. Let's get friends and family. And because you're so excited, you think it's going to work. So you go big, big, big. Well, the second one did not work at all. And it did not work at all so badly that when it was finally closed, it was close to an $800,000 loss. And it meant our entire home equity line, kids' college savings, everything went right down with it. That was right when I lost the Fox show. So I'm unemployed. The liens start hitting the house. The phone starts ringing all the time, and it's collections calls. So you unplug the phone.
That would stress me out.
Well, you just unplug the phone.
Oh my
that's
gosh.
how you deal with that. But I remember I remember 2 things from that period of my life that were really painful, and one was having to call the town and tell them that we could not afford the $175 for our 6th grader to play soccer, so we needed to pull her out. And I remember there being times, because I was so afraid to look at the checking account, that I would stand at the grocery store and items would scan and I could just feel that wave of anxiety rising, thinking, I don't think the check card's going to go through. And so I would stand there. I always had an excuse, and it was to look at the person and go, oh, that's strange. It just worked at the gas station.
Oh my gosh.
Because what would have been more empowering is to probably say, oh, well, I guess I don't have the money for this. Let's take this, this, and this. And just kind of like the easiest thing to do is to tell the truth. But I was so filled with shame.
Yeah.
So I started to develop this habit of hitting the snooze button. Because what would happen is the alarm would go off in the morning. And the first thing I would think about is all the problems that we had. And how awfully things had gone off the tracks.
And you didn't want to deal with them.
No, and I also didn't know. I didn't think I could. And this goes back to the feelings. Like you think that you need to feel confident or courageous in order to get started. You don't. You actually just have to start, and that's the riddle of life. that lying in bed, hoping that you wake up some morning motivated to change, that's not the answer. You actually have to learn how to push yourself. You have to learn how to leverage the power of your decisions, and you've got to learn how to take action when you don't feel like it. Because every morning when I woke up, I did not feel confident. I felt like a loser. Yeah. I felt like the world's worst parent. I felt like I had failed at every single turn. I did not know if Chris and I could pull out of this spiral. I did not know if we were going to go bankrupt and lose the house and move from our community. I did not know if our marriage would survive. I knew I wanted it to. And see, this is the knowledge action gap. You can know what you want. You can know what you should be doing. But how do you make yourself do it when the feelings and the motivation isn't there? When all you got is fear? And so every night I would lie in bed and I would say to myself, all right, that's it, Mel. Tomorrow, it's the new you. Tomorrow, you're going to wake up and be motivated. You're going to get up. You're going to exercise like everybody says you should. You're going to meditate. You're going to get those kids on the bus. You're going to screw Fox. You're going to look for a job. You're going to cold call Cox Media, and you're going to do auditions. Come on, girl, let's go. You're going to take a cold shower. Woo! Here we go. And I meant it when I was saying it. Maybe it was the alcohol that was talking, but then I would wake up and I didn't feel any of those things. Mm-hmm. So I would hit the snooze. And I would hit the snooze. Now, why was I hitting the snooze when I knew it wasn't the right decision? I'm going to tell you why. And this is something that I was blown away by when I discovered it. You don't make decisions with your goals. You don't make decisions with your prefrontal cortex. You don't make decisions with logic. Do you know how we make decisions? I didn't invent this. A neuroscientist by the name of Damasio, who does his research in Brazil, who gave an incredible TED Talk and wrote about this forever and ever and ever. We make decisions with feelings. 95% of our decisions are made by how you feel in the moment. And that is the problem. You need to take control of the moment and leverage the power of your decisions and make them up here. Because when I was lying in bed, I wasn't saying to myself, I should get up because that's going to help me start my day right. I was saying, do I feel like getting up?
No, you don't.
No. Do you feel like making that cold call? No, you don't. Do you feel like doing that third set of reps? No, you don't. Do you feel like having that hard conversation? No, you don't. Do you feel like ending this relationship, whether it's in business or in your life, that is sucking you dry? No, you don't. We make decisions based on our feelings, and that is robbing you of joy and opportunity. And it is blinding you from the fact that how you change your life is 1 5-second decision at a time, one push at a time. And if you accept the fact that you may never feel ready and you may never feel motivated and you may never feel confident, you may never feel courageous, and that's okay, but you can still push yourself forward. What happens over time is as you start to see yourself becoming the person that takes action, that you start to see yourself becoming the kind of person that speaks even though your voice is shaking. You're the kind of person that has a bias toward moving instead of a bias toward thinking. Guess what happens? You build the skill of confidence and courage. And so what happened for me is I was stuck, Lewis. I was so stuck. We were heading straight for divorce. We were heading for bankruptcy. I knew I wanted to change things. And so one night I see this commercial. This is the stupidest story on the planet, but this is what happened. I see this commercial. And, again, I also was drinking too much. I probably had a couple Manhattans in me. Sure. That's my drink. I'm from the Midwest, just like you. Yeah. All right, little Manhattan there, little bourbon. And there was a rocket ship launching.
On a commercial.
Yeah. And I had this instinct, this innovation, this disruptive idea, right? Oh, my God, Mel. That's the answer. Tomorrow morning, you're going to launch your ass out of bed like a rocket ship. You're going to move so fast, you can't even think about your problems. Dumb, right? Mm-hmm. Totally dumb. But seems like this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I cannot believe I have this chick on my podcast.
No, I understand it. You got to get moving first.
Yes.
That's the thing. You just got to wake up at 6 a.m. or whenever it is and go into the gym. And when you're in the gym, you're going to start moving the first weight. Yes. And then you'll start moving the second weight.
Actually, people use the 5-second rule at the gym because you know how much time people waste at the gym standing around thinking about the next thing?
Probably 70% of the time.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the next morning the alarm goes off and nothing had changed in my life. I woke up, to the lien on the house, the fighting with Chris, the unemployment, the lack of confidence, the lack of courage, the whole thing. But I did something I had never done before. I went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just like NASA. I actually counted. And then I stood up and I was like, what the hell just happened?
Uh-huh.
What? That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The next morning I used it again, it worked. The next morning I used it again, it worked. And then I started to notice something, and this is one of those things. So we have an 11-year-old son who has dyslexia. And when they finally diagnosed him, it was as if, of course, it was as if, like, how could we have possibly missed this? Are we the worst parents in the world? I mean, the kid can barely write. He can't cut his food. He doesn't read. Like, no wonder he doesn't do team sports. It was right under our nose. And what I'm about to tell you is right under everybody's nose. There's a 5-second window between the instincts, the shoulds, the urges, the inner wisdom, the things that can change your life if you listen to it. Got a 5-second window from the moment you feel that instinct to move. And if you don't, your brain is actually designed to kill it. 5 seconds is all you have. The second you hesitate, and you feel yourself hesitating, that is a moment of huge power, because what's happened is you've just started to pull back from something that you need to lean into. And if you count backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and this is the neuroscience behind why this stupid little trick works, counting is an action. Counting backwards requires focus. It's also not a habit for you yet. So when you feel yourself hesitate, you're triggering your mind that something's up. Like Lewis didn't hesitate when he pulled on his pants. He didn't hesitate when he's drinking his coffee. He didn't hesitate when he walked out the door to the gym, but now he's hesitating to make that call. Your mind now goes into a cognitive bias called the spotlight effect. It magnifies whatever it was that you hesitated doing.
The moment.
The moment. Yeah. Like all of a sudden you're like, hey, I don't feel like it. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'll do it later. Right. And your mind is doing it because your mind's trying to protect you. Hesitation signals a red flag to your mind that something's up. Just that small hesitation. It's a habit that we all have. Should you hesitate if you're getting a tattoo? Yes. Should you hesitate if you're gambling? Yes. Should you hesitate if you are signing a legal document? Yes. You need your prefrontal cortex for those things. You need to interrupt it, make a decision. Should you hesitate on making a phone call? No. Should you hesitate on speaking up in a meeting? No. Should you hesitate when you feel yourself starting to procrastinate and you know you got work that you should get done? No, you shouldn't hesitate at all. Should you hesitate in saying the thing that you really feel in your heart? No, you shouldn't. Should you hesitate and edit yourself when you're talking? No, you shouldn't. But we've all trained ourselves to. So it's actually this habit of hesitating. You start catching yourself. It's a huge moment of power because you have a decision to make and you got to make it in the next 5 seconds. Are you going to go on autopilot and get trapped in your mind? Or are you going to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and awaken your prefrontal cortex and drive forward? So I started to use this rule as I noticed that every day, all day long, I had these moments of inner wisdom where I would know that I needed to pick up the phone and stop isolating myself. I would know that I needed to call a bunch of media companies and start auditioning for radio show hosting gigs. I knew that I should get out of bed on time. I knew I should stop myself before I snapped at Chris, right? Self-monitor.
Yeah. I
knew I should not let the frustration be the things that was driving me. And so I started to use the rule all day long. Whenever I felt this, I should do this, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I would make myself do it. And slowly, 5 seconds at a time, my entire life started to change. And my husband used it in his business, and he and his business partner dove in. They went on to open 7 more restaurants. I went on to launch and sell 2 businesses and get recruited by CNN and join their team. I had a syndicated radio show that ended up winning the Gracie Award, which is kind of the female media, awards for the #1 talk show in the country. And, I never intended to tell anybody about the 5-second rule. First of all, because it's stupid.
Right.
I mean, come on. Count backwards? That's the dumbest thing
That's stupid to me, though. What? Anything that works for me.
That's true.
You know what I mean? I'll take any stupid thing.
That's true. But I also was like, how do you start talking about something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I was asked to give a TED Talk like 6 years ago, and TED 6 years ago, not the brand that it was today. They weren't even putting the talks online yet.
Really?
Yeah, the TEDx talks were not online yet. And so that was the first speech I'd ever given in my life. If you want to see what somebody looks like having a panic attack for 21 minutes straight, watch that speech. I was backstage and it was like one PhD after another going out there. I'm like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? This is the dumbest thing. And so at the very end, I wasn't even planning on talking about it. I say, oh, by the way, there's this thing I do. That's it. I don't even explain it. And you know why I didn't explain it, Lewis? I didn't know why it worked.
So you didn't have the science or the research. You were just
Zero. And then something crazy happened. They put that talk online a year later and people started to write. We've heard from more than 100,000 people in 90 countries that have written to us that are using the rule in ways big and small to change their lives, to change their marriages, to change their thinking patterns, to grow their businesses. We know of 11 people that have stopped themselves from killing themselves.
Wow.
In the moment, there's a gentleman that we talk about in the book, and you can see his social media posts in London. He was a veteran, and he was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he boarded a ferry with the intention of jumping overboard. And he got to the railing, and he was standing there, and his inner wisdom kicked in. And this is another thing I want everybody watching to understand. I don't care what you're facing or how low you get. Your inner wisdom is always there. It is. And the thing is that we often don't listen to it. And so he's standing there intending to kill himself, and that inner wisdom kicks in. And he remembers the 5-second rule. And he goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he turns and physically moves away from the railing and finds the first person working on the ferry and tells him that he's suicidal. Saved his life.
Wow.
He saved his life because he listened to the inner wisdom. And this is the other thing I love about this rule. It's not something to think about. It's a tool to use. So the part of the problem with a lot of the advice that I've found, for me personally, is that a lot of advice is all about kind of doing mental battle. And if I go upstairs, I'm behind enemy lines and I tend to get hijacked.
Right.
So I love this tool because 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 interrupts those patterns. It actually prompts the part of the brain that I need in order to change. And it makes changing easier because I've now got my mind working for me instead of against me. And it gets me out of my head. And so I'm super excited to share this rule with people because I now know not only that it's working, just not for me, it's working for people around the world. And, you know, in the book, it took me 3 years to write it. It's all the science behind the rule. Yeah. It's got more than 150 social media posts in it. So you see stories from around the world of people using it to end procrastination, to build confidence, to deepen their relationships, to launch businesses, to explode the sales. Why does it help with sales? I'll tell you why. Because you can't sell by thinking. Selling is about action. We have groups from companies around the world, sales teams that put 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 up on the wall. Really? I'm sure they hate me.
That's cool.
Yes, because cold calling, it's a momentum thing. If you stop and think, the phone is not getting, the dialing is not happening when you're thinking.
Yeah. If you're thinking about all those no's you've been getting,
yes,
you're not going to want to do it again because it doesn't feel good.
Yes, and if you're in the middle of a negotiation or you're in the middle of a really difficult conversation, and again, remember what we said earlier? You cannot control your feelings that rise up, but you can always control how you think and what you do. So if you're in the middle of a difficult conversation and you feel those feelings come up that normally trigger you to start editing yourself or to censor yourself or to silence yourself or to think sabotaging thoughts in like a business negotiation, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, awaken the prefrontal cortex, get back in the game. By counting backwards, the kind of cheat code that you're doing in your mind is you are interrupting what are called habit loops that get encoded in the central part of your brain, and you are starting up the prefrontal cortex. It's a little trick that causes focus, and it's a lot like having a mantra because you're shifting gears. But the thing about having a mantra is, and I suppose that as you count backwards more and more and more, you become used to it, but it becomes a habit that triggers action. So what you do is you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cut off this part of the brain, awaken this part of the brain, and then move. And what happens with the counting backwards is there's nowhere to go after 1. And your mind is socialized in a countdown situation to go. Yep. And so counting up won't work because you can keep going
forever.
and you do it in many aspects of your life, so it's actually not something that requires any focus. See, the prefrontal cortex in functional MRIs is lit up like a Christmas tree when you're doing something that requires courage, when you're engaged in strategic thinking, or when you're learning a new behavior.
Aha.
So we've invented, or I created a little cheat for switching the gears manually between the part of the brain that actually makes changing difficult and keeps you stuck and the part of the brain that you need in order to change.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
And then you engage in the behavior that you're afraid of, or that the crocodile brain part is saying, don't do this, or this is going to be scary or bad. Or...
Yeah. So if you're sitting with a client who constantly scope creeps on you, and you know you want to say something, but you start to feel that hesitation, you're about to chicken out, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And you say, hey, this is outside the scope of what we talked about. It's not going to,
Yes.
it's not a huge deal, but we just need to redefine the scope to it.
Yeah, you say whatever. Or if you have a drinking problem and you feel yourself drawn toward it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 interrupts the habit of grabbing for it based on whatever trigger made you want to have the drink, and you turn and you move away from it. So it is a way to have courage in the moment. It's a way to have self-control in the moment. It's a way to be present and, awake in the moment. It's a way to interrupt patterns of behavior. I use it right now for my tone of voice. I use it because I get in the zone, and then I have this edge to my tone of voice that I really don't like. And the more that we do video and I see it, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to sound like that. I use it for sure to exercise because I hate to exercise. I still, 8 years later, I discovered this thing in 2008 by mistake, trying to beat my habit of hitting the snooze alarm.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I still, every day, use it every single morning to get out of bed. Every single morning. I hate getting out of bed. I hate
this about you.
it. I use it now that I'm 48, soon to be 49. When I wake up at 2:37 and I have to go to the bathroom, I use it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to just get out of the damn bed. Because you know what we all do at our age. We lay there and we're like, okay, just go back to bed, just go back to bed. But that doesn't work. 47 minutes later, you still have to pee. So just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get up, go to the bathroom, come back, go to bed, all good.
And I think so many of us have lost touch with the feeling. Yes. People are like, what is the feeling? And then the self-doubt starts to creep in, and the judgment and they probably know better than I do, that outsourcing of our intuition. How do you have people practice that? Okay, thank you for opening the door. I'm going to walk right in. We were going to talk about this cheesy ass thing that I invented during a crazy low moment in my life, and I call it the high five habit. And the high five habit, it begins with one habit, but it is a series of small things that you can do every single day to locate your power back within yourself. Because you're right, we have outsourced our self-worth. We look outside of ourselves for validation. We look at the number on the scale, the amount of money in the bank, the car that we drive, the person that we're dating, the friend group that we have, the amount of likes, the amount of views. All of that external shit is never going to make you feel worthy. The only person that can build your self-worth is you. There's a reason why that word begins with self. It begins within yourself. And so I'm going to tell you the story about how I stumbled upon this thing. And my brand of personal development, improving your life, falls into a particular category. First, I have to fuck up my life. Then I have to save myself. Then I stumble upon something that sounds ridiculously stupid on its face. And when it starts to work and I'm dumbfounded by how this dumb thing is actually working, I then start to unpack the research. And so whether we're talking about something I created over a decade ago called the 5-second rule, or we're talking about the high five habit, brace yourself. Because when you first hear this, you're going to think, this is the corniest thing I have ever heard. Now, I'm going to just say something that might sound obnoxious. I make millions of dollars. I am wildly successful.
I have been married for 25 years. I have 3 kids who are awesome and irritating. I have lived with anxiety for 25 years. I've healed and continue to work on healing my trauma. And I will stand firm in telling you, the high 5 habit is the single most powerful thing I've ever discovered. So here's what happened. About a year ago, I found myself in a moment where I felt like life was punching me in the face. The first thing that happened is, it was March, and they found COVID at the CBS Broadcast Center. And at the time, I was in my dream job. I was hosting a daytime syndicated talk show with Sony Pictures Television. We were wrapping up season 1. We had like 7 more episodes of the 175 that we were taping. I loved this job. And we got 5 minutes notice. They canceled the show. Didn't have a chance to say goodbye to the 130 people. I'm like, what just happened? I get in my car. I'm driving back home to Boston. I'm seeing the New York City skyline disappear. The phone calls start coming in. And our daughters who were in college at the time are now freaking out because they're closing down USC and she's got to pack and get home. And like everybody remembers that moment when the quarantine and the pandemic shut your life down or turned it upside down, or you lost somebody you love. Maybe it was that you couldn't go to the nursing home to see your grandmother. Maybe you got that email from the office saying you can't come in. There was some moment that had happened. And so from there, once we got home, it was my husband and I and our 3 kids. My business went into a free fall. Every single speech that I had for more than a year gets canceled. My publisher calls me and says, that book that you haven't delivered, we're going to cancel the contract, and the advance that we've given you that you've already spent, we need it back. And what happened is I started to get really triggered, because when life turns upside down, your old shit will come up. And my old shit includes just 10 years ago being nearly $1 million in debt and facing that financial crisis like a lot of high-functioning adults do, which is drinking myself into the ground and blaming everything on my husband. That was the moment that I invented the 5-second rule to help me get out of bed, because the anxiety was so profound. It was pinning me to that bed like a gravity blanket every morning. That's a whole nother story. So I'm starting to have flashbacks like, are you fucking kidding me? I have clawed my way out of that. I have become a success over the last 10 years. I've paid down all that debt. We're saving money. I'm super successful. And this shit is happening again. So I start to spiral. I'm worried about everybody, just like everybody was. What's going to happen to my grandparents? What's happening to my parents? When am I going to see my friends again? What about the frontline workers? Like, it was just a free fall. And so one morning, I wake up, I make my bed, I walk into the bathroom, and I see my reflection as I'm brushing my teeth. And I think, God, you look like hell. Like the gray hair is coming in, and I've got these dark circles under my eyes, and my neck is all saggy, and my jowls are looking like saddlebags on a pack mule, going down the Grand Canyon. One boob is hanging lower than the other. And I've even at this point had my breast implants out. Like, I'm just like, what the? And once you have a negative thought or the self-criticism starts, it's sort of like lint in a dryer.
100%.
As it starts to gather, it collects more.
Yeah.
And so then I start thinking
Start to get more creative with it.
Yeah. I'm like, yes, spin in the story. I'm like, oh my God, why'd I get up so late? I've got a Zoom call in 8 minutes. I look like shit. I don't even have a bra on yet. The dog's at my feet and he needs to be walked. I didn't respond to their text. Like, I'm just doing the beat down. And here's the thing. Most of us don't realize that's your morning routine. We talk a big game about have a great morning routine. But the truth is, your morning routine right now either involves ignoring yourself in the mirror or criticizing yourself. And I don't know what came over me. In that moment, standing there, literally in my underwear, I just felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'm one of the most booked motivational speakers in the world. I couldn't think of a damn thing to say to myself. Now, if either of you had walked into my bathroom that morning, I would have been able to lift you up. I would have been able to tell you what to do. But when it came to supporting and encouraging myself, I had nothing. And for whatever reason, as pathetic and as corny as it sounds, standing there in that very low moment, I just raised my hand and I high-fived my reflection. Now, it didn't change my life, but something inside me shifted. I felt my shoulders drop. I felt my chin lift up. I sort of silently felt myself say, it's okay. You got this. You can do this. And I left the bathroom. Now, the second morning, this is when things started to go, I got up, I made my bed, I started walking to the bathroom, and then this is what I noticed that's really weird. I started to feel excited to see myself. And it's sort of like, as I was riding the elevator up here to meet you two for the first time, I felt this enthusiasm and this excitement because I really admire you two and I love, what you're doing out in the world. I felt that same sense of I'm going to see a friend. Now, I'm going to be 53 years old this year. I think for the first 45 years of my life, I've either criticized the woman I see in the mirror or I've ignored her. I don't ever remember looking forward to seeing myself. Maybe seeing an outfit or seeing what my makeup looked like, but never actually seeing me, the human being. And I stood there in front of the mirror and I thought about what was going on in my life. And I thought about how I was going to show up and I raised my hand in the mirror again. Now, here's the interesting thing that you're going to notice when you start doing this. It is impossible to criticize yourself when you raise your hand and high five yourself. And there's a lot of research that explains why. And this is the first piece of research that I'll lay on you because it's unbelievable. Basically, you and I, we've been high-fiving people our entire lives. So when you give somebody or you receive a high five, what does it communicate to you? Yeah, I believe you. I love you. I got you. I see you. If somebody's attitude's going down and you hit them with a high five, it's all right, shake it off. Get back in there. I got your back. All of that positive programming associated with that gesture is already encoded in your basal ganglia, the subconscious part of your brain. When you raise your own hand physically, the subconscious part of your brain recognizes the high five. It automatically turns on all that positive messaging and marries it with your own reflection.
Wow.
It's a field of study called neurobics. Now, I didn't make that up. It's like aerobic physical activity with neural pathway development. And neurobics, marrying an unexpected physical action with a change in thought, is the fastest way to develop new neural pathways. So by high-fiving your reflection, you are shutting up the critic. You are interrupting all of the default programming that you've had for your entire life. And you are leveraging the lifetime positive programming of belief, enthusiasm, support, and celebration. And that's just the fucking beginning. I just spoke to Dr. Daniel Amen, one of the world's leading experts on the brain. The dude has literally scanned 65,000 brains. He has treated Mike Tyson, Miley Cyrus, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So I was talking to him about this high five habit. He geeked out in the way that scientists do. He's like, okay, Mel, let me tell you what else is going on. You want to know what else is going on? You want to know why when you start to do this as a habit, you start to feel a little jolt of energy? You want to know why your mood boosts a little bit when you can get over how weird it is? I'm like, yeah, Dr. Amen, lay it on me. So here's the thing. What do you do when you cross a finish line in a race? You raise your hands. What do you do when you see somebody? You raise your hands to say hi. What do you do when you hug somebody? You raise your hands. What do you do when you pat somebody on the back? You raise their hands. What do you do when you do the double high five? You raise your hands. When your favorite band comes out, you raise your hands. When somebody blows out the candles on a birthday, we all raise our hands. Raising your hands is remembered in your nervous system as a celebratory activity. And so when you do it with yourself, your nervous system starts to switch off from the sympathetic fight or flight into the calmer, more celebratory, cool, sympathetic nervous system or parasympathetic. And then on top of it, you get a drip of dopamine. That's why your mood boosts. Wow. That's why you feel more focused. That is why some of the science says this works.
Wow.
Now, of course, I didn't know any of that.
Yes.
I didn't know any of that at all when I first started to use it. And, I just used it in secret for the first couple weeks. And then I posted a photo online. And within an hour, 100 people had posted photos of themselves, high-fiving themselves, and tagged me. And I thought, all right, maybe there's something here. Maybe this isn't so fucking cheesy.
Wow.
Maybe science can explain why taking this simple ritual and doing it right after you brush your teeth is possibly the single best thing that you could do for self-love, for self-confidence, for self-worth, for investing and strengthening the relationship you have with yourself.
But there is something about that practice. And then even too with people, even if we're talking about health and wellness, and we were like, all you've got to do is get 8 hours of sleep, drink a lot of water, eat really well. It's like it's almost too easy. I think about that with meditation. It's like, it can be hard to kind of calm the mind, but a lot of the biggest solutions in life are actually very easy. It's like, say sorry, show up, get sleep, drink water, all these things. But when you provide that solution for people, they don't want to, it's too simple. So we always need more of these explanations. It needs to be more complicated. I don't know if that's something where we're so used to things being hard or we want it to be hard, but there is a part of us that tends to complicate things where they don't need to. So when we hear a solution like that, we're like, that's corny. That's cheesy.
Yeah. Well, and also let me unpack the resistance.
Yes.
So when you first stand, I tell people, you have to do this for 5 days. You have to try it for 5 days because 99% of people who try this will stand in front of the mirror and you are going to feel this major resistance to doing it. And I'm going to tell you why, because the resistance is really sad. And this resistance to high-fiving yourself is the exact same resistance that stands between you and absolutely everything that you want in your life. So when you stand before yourself in the mirror, what you bring with you is all of the judgment and regrets and shame and trauma and abuse and the stories that you have about who you are and what's happened to you. And most of us do not see a person who is worthy of celebration. The resistance comes from a deep-seated belief that because of what's happened to you, you do not deserve to be celebrated. Because of the mistakes that you've made, because of the regrets that you have, you do not deserve it. And I'm here to tell you, I'm on a mission to make every man, woman, child, everybody on the planet to understand that if you can wake up and drag your ass into that bathroom and look yourself in the eye and you are still breathing and you're still trying to do a little better today, you not only deserve to be seen, supported, and celebrated, you need it. Withholding that from yourself is exactly why you're not feeling motivated and encouraged. You're waiting for your boss or your lover or your friends or your parents to tell you you deserve it. I'm here to tell you, you have to learn how to give it to yourself every single fucking day, like your life depends upon it, because it does. And if you hear passion and conviction in my voice, it is because despite my success, despite the amount of stuff that I've muscled my way through, I have spent the majority of my life hating the person I saw in the mirror. And I think truthfully, most of us do. And that's not the only reason why you resist it. The other reason why you resist it is because we have all bought into this lie that unless you do something worthy of celebration, you don't deserve it yet. So for example, if that number on the scale isn't the right number, you don't deserve a high five because you haven't hit that goal yet. Unless you're the prettiest one in the room, or you have the bank account, or you've gotten pregnant, or you're married now, or you're in love, or you're this, or you're that. You are standing there in judgment because you don't see a human being that needs those things. You see somebody that hasn't measured up yet. So you're going to withhold that stuff. Now, I want you to think about something. If you've ever watched a marathon race or you've ever run one, something interesting happens. Nobody stands on the side of a marathon with their arms crossed and is like, yeah, let's see if you can do this, motherfucker. Everybody is like high-fiving the runners and cheering for them every single step of the way. I remember when I ran the New York City Marathon in 2001. I was a brand new mom. I had 2 kids under the age of 3. I had no business running that race. I had barely trained. I did not get the memo that you should buy sneakers longer than two weeks ahead of the race. But I had gotten like the lottery number and I was hell-bent. It was like a bucket list thing. I'm going to tell you, when my bladder started leaking at mile 7 and the blood blisters started, and the only thing that kept me going was the slap of a stranger's hand. Somebody else's belief made me believe that I could do it. And I'm here to tell you every single morning, I don't give a shit that it's cheesy. In fact, if you think it's cheesy, I want you to fucking do it. Because you, in particular, if you bring that level of resignation or arm crossing or eye rolling to this shit, you are going to be miserable. You may be an overachiever just like I am. And there's 2 things about being an overachiever. Number 1, most of us that are overachievers focus on all the shit that's going wrong. So despite all the amazing things that you're doing, you literally focus on the one thing that's going wrong and you pound yourself into the ground. So you have no joy. You rob yourself of momentum and of the experience and happiness of small wins. The second thing about chasing achievement is that most of us that are driven by achievement, somewhere along the line as little kids, put 2 and 2 together. Oh, when I'm winning at sports or I'm getting good grades or I'm elected to the, class president or I'm the first chair of the flute section, people love me. And the problem with that association, achievement equals love, is you will always chase it. You will feel that you are unworthy and unlovable unless you're achieving. And you'll also struggle with jealousy because when anybody else is achieving, it makes you feel like you're no longer worthy of love because they're beating you at something. And the fact is, when you got to lasso that back in, you got to be able to stand in front of that mirror and you got to be able to look at yourself in the eye. And no matter where you are or what you're going through, and particularly if it's a challenging moment, you've got to develop a habit of seeing yourself, celebrating yourself for showing up yet again. And when you start to celebrate these small little things that you're doing, I just got out of bed, high fucking five. Those little things start to add up and you start to realize over time, holy shit, I do get things done. I am a good person. I am worthy of being treated well because I'm treating myself well. Maybe, just maybe, I could do anything.
Do you know how often you hesitate and stop yourself? All day long. There's actually a neurological reason why change is so hard. Your brain is designed to stop you from changing. Let me explain. You see, change requires you to do things that are uncertain, scary, or new. Your brain is designed to protect you from doing things that are uncertain, scary, or new. What's your brain's favorite way to protect you? To trap you in your head by making you overthink. I've studied and interviewed the leading researchers in psychology and human behavior, and what they've taught me is that the moment you want to change, break a habit, or do something hard or scary and you hesitate, your brain goes to work to stop you. Now, there's all kinds of fancy names for this. Cognitive biases, the paradox of choice, the psychological immune system, the spotlight effect. I could name hundreds of them. You don't need to know the fancy names. You just need to know one simple fact. There is a system in your head that is stopping you every step of the way. And the 5-second rule is the only tool that you need to beat it. So how does the 5-second rule beat the system in your head? There are 2 explanations. First, I'm going to give you the simple one, then I'm going to explain the science. At its most basic level, the 5-second rule is a tool that helps you take action. It gets you out of your head, and that's the secret. You've got to stop thinking and start living before the system in your head has a chance to stop you. Now let's talk about the science. The 5-second rule leverages proven principles in modern psychology, and there are literally hundreds of examples that I could point to, but in this video we're just going to focus on 5 of them. First, let's talk about 2 concepts, one called locus of control, the second called a bias toward action. So a locus of control is a foundational principle in psychology. You should Google it. Back in the day, researchers figured out that there are basically 2 kinds of people. People that believe that they're in control of their lives, and folks that believe that life is just happening to them and they're a victim of whatever might happen. Now, when you look at these 2 types of people, people that have an internal locus of control, a belief that they're in control of their lives, they're happier, they're more successful, more productive. So the question becomes, how do you create an internal locus of control in yourself? The answer is simple. It's called a bias toward action. So a bias toward action is a psychological principle that means you're the kind of person that has a bias toward taking action instead of a bias toward thinking. How do you create a bias toward action? You guessed it, the 5-second rule. The 5-second rule is a tool that will teach you how to take action. And over time, as you use it, you not only learn how to take action, you become the kind of person that operates with a bias toward taking action. And when you take action over and over and over on your instincts, on your desires, on your commitments, guess what you get? You build an internal locus of control. You become the kind of person that believes that you're in control of your life because you're proving it to yourself, one 5-second decision at a time. Let's move on to topic 2, behavioral flexibility. So just a few years ago, scientists thought that our brains stopped growing at the age of about 25. What we now know is that your brain never stops growing. We have the ability to learn new things throughout an entire lifetime. We call this behavioral flexibility. One of the things that's exciting about the 5-second rule and that we see from people all over the world is that when they utilize the rule over and over and over again, they not only create immediate change in the moment with a 5-second decision, but that over time, as they repeat the new behavior, whether it's speaking up in meetings more or it is pushing yourself to exercise over and over, that you actually create new habits and become an entirely different person. This is what your brain is designed to do in terms of its neural pathways and the way that new neural pathways can develop. Every time you use the 5-second rule and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, activate your prefrontal cortex and shift your behavior, you are not only creating immediate behavior change, over the long run, thanks to behavioral flexibility, you're creating lasting behavior change. The third principle is do good, be good. Now, this is a principle that I first learned about from legendary psychological researcher and University of Virginia professor Timothy Wilson. Basically, it means that you can't think your way to being happier or better. You actually got to do something. Now, this do good, be good philosophy dates all the way back to Aristotle, and it's based on the belief and now the proven technique that in order to change, you can't think your way to being more positive. You've got to do things, you got to act, and then your mind will follow. What is the 5-second rule? It's a tool that will help you stop thinking and start doing. Do good, be good, and then your mind will follow. The fourth principle, and that's the golden rule of habits. Now, I could spend 2 or 3 hours just talking about habit research, and whether you read Charles Duhigg's best-selling book or Gretchen Rubin's book on habits, or you watch a number of TED Talks, all researchers believe that habits come down to one golden rule, and that's this. You can never change the things that trigger you. You can't control your urges or how you might feel, but you can always choose how you behave. If you want to break a habit, once you have a habit, it's always going to be encoded in your brain. The only way that you can break it is to replace it with new behavior. There's also something in the research around habits called a starting ritual. A starting ritual is a repeated behavior that you adopt in order to trigger a new habit. The 5-second rule is so incredibly powerful when it comes to breaking old habits and adopting new ones because, number one, the 5-second rule and counting backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is a starting ritual. It will interrupt the old behavior pattern and it will trigger a new one. The 5-second rule over time, and this is really cool, actually becomes the new pattern of behavior. Instead of stopping yourself with self-doubt or blowing things off or overeating, you have a new pattern of behavior. You catch yourself. You gain control. You have confidence. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you do the thing that you know you want to do. And finally, the principle called activation energy. Now, activation energy is something that was first introduced into the field of human behavior and psychology several decades ago by a rock star professor at the University of Chicago that studied a state of flow. His name was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he was one of the first really to study human behavior, human performance, and he coined this term activation energy. He actually borrowed it from chemistry. And it's a term that describes this phenomenon. In order to start any kind of chemical reaction, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to create that initial spark. A lot more energy to start it than to keep it going. There's a direct correlation to you and me. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to just get started? How hard it is to get to the gym? How hard it is to get out of bed? How hard it is to put down the bottle when you go to pour a second drink and you know you shouldn't? That feeling, how hard it is to get started, this is what Mihai's talking about. You need activation energy to start the chain, to start to sit down, to start to get out of bed, to start to walk out the door. That's the key to creating any kind of change. This activation energy inside of you that causes the initial boom. And then what do we hear over time? Once you start, there's a chain reaction, and that allows you to keep going. So what's this have to do with the 5-second rule? Freaking everything. The 5-second rule creates activation energy in you. The 5-second rule is how you activate change inside of you. It is a tool. When you start counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you awaken your prefrontal cortex. You begin the process of changing. You push yourself in a new direction. That first push, that's going to be the hardest. Once you get moving, it gets so much easier. So those are just 5 psychological, scientific principles that explain the power of the 5-second rule. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.